Tales of Estolia by Sashina Kerfman. Volume 1. The Promise of Zacharias. Part 7. Catalyst of Change. Chapter 7. The Sweetest Reward.
With all the international intrigues swirling through the power structures of the mightiest nations on earth, there was something satisfying in knowing that, at the very least, comparing to the rest of the world, with greed and avarice leaving them in a state of perpetual emotional and moral bankruptcy, Estolia was an oasis of sanity. Every time I returned to my country, my body, self and soul would recharge in the ambience of spirituality, bringing me comfort and peace. I cherished it throughout my youth. I had no idea how deeply it would affect me when that sanctuary was threatened. Sebastiani Alexandros Zacharian. Enscrito.
What happens when we get to Estolia?
He relaxed slightly and smiled in genuine pleasure.
I am pretty sure my two brothers, my father and my uncle will all meet us at the airport.
He paused, and the pleasant expression dropped off his face.
As an Estolian, normally all marriages must be approved through the church. We may have some religious constraints put upon us when we arrive.
Like what?
She asked, wondering what sort of religion Estolians practiced. Nothing she read about this man mentioned religion. It occurred to her that he might be a member of one of the more restrictive Middle Eastern religions. The unanswered questions swirling through her mind made her realize the enormity of what she had done, tying herself to this man she did not know, for life.
Do not be too disturbed or concerned,
he said with a smile.
Nothing truly bizarre will be asked of us. The Estolian faith has its peculiarities, like most religions, but nothing that you would find onerous or difficult. You would be surprised at the one thing I have done that is contrary to our teachings, and for which I might receive censure.
What did you do?
He grinned. The expression transformed his face and made him seem much younger than her first estimate.
The most egregious thing I did not do was consummate our union prior to the wedding.
That is a peculiar inversion.
She grinned back.
The Estolian faith is unique. It has no analogues in the greater world.
Is it a sin to not consummate the union prior to marriage?
She stumbled over the word, but was grateful for the chance to use his word instead of the vernacular terms that were all too common.
Sin is a Western word. I do not believe that there is an equivalent word in the Estolian language. However, I have broken with tradition. For this reason, I do not know what the leader of the religion, my brother Nico, will have me do as a response. Other young people who have strayed have been banished permanently from Estolia.
You expect to be banished?
No, not really. I do not live in Estolia, and have no plans to live there permanently. Thus, being banished would be immaterial.
His expression grew more somber.
I simply do not know how the leadership will respond.
He reached for her hand, and his thumb rubbed over the skin on the back of it for several moments. The flight attendant poured them both a glass of wine before moving unobtrusively away from them, giving them privacy.
They may require us to spend a week in the temple. That is not unusual. In fact, it is typical. I am hopeful we will be asked to do this thing.
He sipped his wine pensively.
Alternatively, I might be informed I am to be banned from the temple. This is a very real possibility as well.
His eyes locked with hers.
There is even the possibility we will not be welcome in Estolia. This could easily be the last time I will set foot on Estolian soil.
Caris could sense the emotions churning beneath his somber exterior, and wanted to cry out at the pain she sensed. She leaned towards him and set one hand lightly on his thigh.
I hope, Zeb, I don't end up costing you your religion or your home nation. I can't regret our marrying. I needed you to save me, but I hope you don't find the sacrifices you've made are beyond bearing.
He set his warm hand over hers on his thigh, and looked at her, studying her face.
I believe, Chrysandra, on balance I will feel as if the actions of this day were both invaluable and inevitable.
She nodded faintly, hoping it was true.
I feel as though this has been so unfair for you, Zeb. I get to be saved quite literally from a fate worse than death, or from death itself, and you get nothing, or worse than nothing, if you're banished from your faith and possibly your homeland.
He quirked a grin at her, pointing out.
You forget, you have, if Reardon's math is correct, nearly doubled my net worth.
She shook her head.
Not yet. First, I must conceive and give birth, and then we must do a paternity test. Once it comes back that you are the father of the child, then you lay claim to my inheritance.
His eyes were warm on her as he said,
Which of course leads to the sweetest reward for me, and that is to have an extraordinarily beautiful wife and children. You are not the only one who benefits from this alliance.
The flight attendant unfolded a table between them.
I will be bringing dinner out in the next 5 minutes,
she said. Over their meal they discussed a variety of topics. Their earlier intensity passed, and they focused on less volatile and emotional topics. Zeb told her about Estolia as a nation, shared some anecdotes about his 2 cousins and 2 brothers and himself, the trouble they got into, and the brief time they were all at Harvard together. Being the youngest of the 5, he said he was the pest they barely put up with, tagging along all the time. Reardon was one of his best friends at Harvard, and Zeb studied law with him more out of friendship than interest, finding an aptitude for the law exceeded only by his aptitude with money. Melody was one of Zeb's Estolian cousins. Caris had a hard time imagining him as a young insecure boy hanging on to the activities of older boys. He seemed very self-assured, as if he was always in control of the situation and events surrounding him. She believed implicitly that in any high-stakes power game, he would always come out on top.
You mentioned that you have a home in Barcelona?
She prompted. He proceeded to tell her about his home in Spain. His hobby was raising Estolian warmbloods, a type of horse, and he sponsored one promising young equestrian every 3 years.
I was blessed to be able to sponsor Desiree Andorra. You likely heard of her. She works in my stable now. Her horse, Cimitarra de España, won the gold medal in dressage during the Tokyo Olympics. It is not often that a person is able to compete and win against the moneyed elite who normally dominate that sport.
Being a financier and entrepreneur meant he did not have a 9-to-5 job. He seemed pleased to be able to tell her that he would never leave her side.
What good is money if one does not use it to make certain to maximize happiness and contentment all the hours of the day? I do not mean the hedonistic selfish pleasure of some, but rather focus instead on being with my family as my primary obligation.
Caris was not quite sure she followed whatever point he was trying to make. The emotional trauma of the day began to take its toll on her, and after her 3rd attempt to stifle a yawn, he encouraged her to put the seat back and close her eyes. It would be many hours before they arrived at their destination. Zeb went over the blessing he had been given regarding the woman he would someday marry. He was promised peace with each of the decisions he would make, the same peace that flooded his soul when he decided to marry this woman. Clearly, he was receiving the guidance of deity steering him down the pathway of life. Every decision he had made since he received Reardon's phone call that morning felt like he was in an impossible labyrinth with the spirit whispering in his heart which way to go at every split in the road. He would never live in Estolia permanently, but that was knowledge he had been given from the start. He hoped he would be able to partake as fully as possible in the blessings of Zacharias. He wanted to be able to share his experiences with his brothers and cousins. He wanted to hear the guiding cadence of his uncle's voice as he shared insights into the experiences that Zeb already had. He wanted to see Nico's power grow as the newly appointed keeper of the soul of Estolia, as he, too, shared his interpretations of all that had taken place around him on this fated day. At some point in his musing, Zeb fell asleep next to his bride.